discrimination.
Whoever has the microphone on, please shut it down. Having said that, a few housekeeping things. First of all, everything will be recorded. If you have a problem with that, then leave us. We're sorry for that, but that's the way it goes. Secondly, please mute all your videos and all your microphones, because some of us has very bad or low connections, and we don't want to have a problem with that. Having said all that, I'm going to give the floor to Mariet Verhoefkoen, who is the president of Women for Water Partnership, to basically set the stage for this session and tell us why it's so important we're doing this. Mariet, the floor is all yours.
Okay, thank you very much. And I can see someone else and not myself in screen, and it doesn't matter. Dear ladies and gentlemen, because when I looked at the list, there were gentlemen, but all protocol observed. From suffragettes to modern day feminists, women and men have fought long and hard for women's right to vote and hold office. Progress is clear. As of 2015, women in every country in the world have the right to vote. The first nation to grant women to vote was New Zealand. We all know that it was in 1893 already. And the last country was Saudi Arabia in 2015. So there is a growing recognition of the capacity and talents of women and women's leadership. Female leaders such as Jacinta Ardern in New Zealand and Angela Merkel in Germany, among many others, have made their mark on the world's political stage in the recent years. Finland elected its youngest prime minister, Juha Sipilä, a woman aged 34. The United States of America elected the first female vice president, Kamala Harris, who stated at this CSW, actually yesterday, when women face obstacles to obtain quality healthcare, when women face food insecurity and poverty, and are disproportionately impacted by climate change, it is hard for women to fully participate in decision-making, which in turn makes it that much harder for democracies to thrive. It's a good thing that also the United States is joining, women are joining there to the government. In 22 countries, women serve as heads of state and of governments. However, at the current rate, equality will be reached in 130 years. Only 25% of all national parliamentarians are women, still far below the 30% benchmark. But it's up from 11% in 1995, which is well known by all of us, Beijing. At the current rate, equality will be reached in 2063. While women have become a growing presence in politics, young women activists have been at the heart of political movements, from Ala Salah in Sudan to Greta Thunberg in the global climate debates, taking center stage across local governments in protests as influential activists and thought leaders. A rising number of women are putting themselves forward for elections, yet their numbers are far behind those of men. Why is this the case? Many women who aspire political office find their way barred by the gender norms that see politics as a masculine space. Although formal rules that impede women's equal participation in politics were eliminated in most countries, informal rules and norms still serve as barriers to women's full participation. Moreover, coalitions and movements which don't support gender equality include those linked to nationalists and populist agendas are growing in power and influence, often embracing traditional gender norms. The stigma against women in politics is still alive, unfortunately. Women continue to face structural, socio-economic, institutional, and cultural barriers. Norms about women's sexuality and mobility put women on an unequal footing in the public space. Norms that affect women's health, education, and financial well-being influence their ability to devote time and resources to political activity and leadership. Beliefs about an often masculine political space affects expectations about about people's clothing, speech, and family life. Expectations leading to unequal voting behavior, unequal treatment, and even undesirable stigmatization and violence. Politically motivated violence against women is on the rise everywhere in the world. It is most visible in attacks against female candidates, but can also include attacks against women who vote, intimidation to deter women from political activity, and all kinds of forms of harassment. In Kenya's 2017 parliamentary elections, a great number of women ran for office. However, many female candidates faced violence and demands that they quit politics. Violence against women politicians is increasing through social media worldwide, also in my own country, the Netherlands. The media as such often strengthen existing stereotypes by focusing on looks or superficial criticism and not on the contents, professional accomplishments of the female candidates. Moreover, financial constraints are often reported as barriers to women running in politics. In Saudi Arabia, women perceive their lack of access to resources as a major constraint to gaining political positions.
Marie,
we know that
30 seconds.
Yeah, I'm almost done. We know that women's participation in politics makes a difference. Women bring different views, talents, and perspectives to politics. A change of how parliaments work, the use of language and behavior. So progress has happened, sometimes by implementing gender quota. Some gains have been achieved by wider gender equality gains in society, but most changes have been achieved through the combination of the courageous actions of individuals, the support of women's groups, and social movements and interventions, such as civil education and skills development programs. So ladies, let's not wait till 2063 or even 2150 before equality will be reached in the political arena. Let's be courageous and fix this system now. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Mariet. I think that was an exceptionally clear message. And I just wanted to point people to a campaign which is called Unmute, which is going on and which is exactly addressing some of the points that Marie just made, which have to do with access and people being able to speak. And there's loads and loads of other things to say about this. Having said that, I would like to, on behalf of all of us, show you a video of two women in Sri Lanka who actually beat the odds and were one of the few women in previous years to be able to be in a high office in government. So, Marit, are you going to start the video, please?
You are the first woman prime minister in the world. Does this have any effect? Do you think it makes your influence less strong or more strong?
I should say more strong.
Do you think they would be more capable of solving the problems of the world than men are so far?
That's left to be seen.
My mother was incredible. She shed her reticence, her shyness. She came forward, and on every political platform, she spoke. My father was Prime Minister first from 1956 to 59 of Sri Lanka, or Ceylon as it was known then. Sadly, his enemies assassinated him. My mother had no intention whatever of going into politics. Her 3 children were fatherless, and she wanted to devote all her time to bringing them up. But there was such a pressure from the party and the people in general that finally she agreed, because she was convinced that it was her duty. My mother's party won the election in 1960, but right-wing forces started saying the nastiest possible things, running down women. How can she lead a political party? But she was utterly unruffled. She said, "Oh, don't worry about it." She carried on. As for us, we 3 felt, my God, we've lost our father to politics. Now, are we going to lose our mother as well? But she never forgot that she was a mother. She took on the mantle of the world's first woman prime minister very comfortably. She took to it like a duck to water. I myself was quite amazed how she became
only tokenistically include us.
the international
This
She
does
played a
not
very
effectively
important role there.
represent
The first woman singer is Mrs. Bandersnayker.
the lives and experiences
I
of
noticed
sex workers,
in no
and
time
it
at all,
denies our
the way
human
she
rights
was
and
carrying
agency.
herself with a great sense of authority.
Often,
When she walked into cabinet,
sex workers
she had
and
a
sex worker
file
activists and
clutched
organisations
like that in her
are
left arm
operating in
and walked with her
incredibly
very
hostile environments,
She
and
came
will
across
be actively
very
excluded
strongly.
from decisions
She was
that
negotiating
impact our
one-to-one with
lives.
leaders of other countries.
However,
I have
it's
never
critical that our
heard
voices
her
are not ignored
She
or
would get angry,
absent or spoken
but
over.
in a very calm,
As we are
manner, she would
uniquely
say what she had to say,
able
which was
to
far more effective.
identify our own
She was very proud
needs
of her second
and
daughter, my sister Chandrika. My mother could see that she
to be
was
able to
born
speak and lead the way towards appropriate law reforms. And
She was overjoyed when my sister became the president of Sri Lanka. She saw the legacy that her husband left behind, which she took on from there. The mantle had now fallen on her daughter, Chandrika.
The world's first woman Prime Minister, Sirima Bandaranaike of Sri Lanka, has died at the age of 84. Mrs. Bandaranaike had been voting in the island's general election. Her daughter is the current president.
Being the world's first female Prime Minister was very important to her. She felt very proud that she'd done it.
Do you hope to see more women in politics?
Oh, yes, I hope to.
That was 1960, ladies. And I think it's incredible that what we now call a developing country was basically one of the first to have a female president and prime minister. And we have seen this development before, you know, the husband dying and then the women have to take over. So that's maybe something we have to contemplate about. How this is happening? Why did they get a chance when their husbands die, or why do they feel obliged when their husbands die? Having said that, I have to apologize for the Minister of Iceland, who was planning to be with us, but she was called into Parliament this afternoon. So she can't, but she apologizes, and I'm sure one way or the other, whatever message she had for us, we'll find another way of getting that to you. Having said that, I would love to introduce to you Raquel Dodge. She is the former Attorney General of Brazil, and as far as I'm concerned, a very brave lady. And there are a few people who need to mute their microphones. But Raquel, please unmute yourself and show yourself on video. A few others like Marita, could you shut down your video? Raquel, please take the floor.
Thank you. I'm grateful for the invitation to participate in this debate that was made to me by Mariette Verhoeven, whom I had the honor of meeting on the occasion of the 8th World Water Forum in Brazil. I can tell you something about the recent Brazilian experience about women in positions of power and the possibility of transformation that they offer. I was the 41st Attorney General of the Republic of Brazil and the first woman
Sorry, I had to mute everyone. So could you please open again, Raquel? Because there was a lot of noise.
Okay, I'm muting now. I will start over. So I'm grateful for this invitation. And I can tell you something about the recent Brazilian experience about women in positions of power and the possibility of transformation that they operate. I was the 41st Attorney General of the Republic of Brazil and the first woman to hold the position. When I applied, I faced a barrier that male competitors did not and do not face, the gender barrier. It wasn't easy. In office, I worked to position other women in positions of power within the Brazilian judicial system. I created, for example, a Human Rights and Collective Defense Secretariat and appointed a female jurist with an agenda that included gender issues. I indicated 2 women to the National Council of Justice, who did an excellent job against domestic violence, to increase the number of female judges and prosecutors in our judicial system, and to approve a protocol that includes the female perspective in the decision-making process. With my departure, these women have been or are being replaced by men without any national debate about it. In my office as Attorney General, I also defended the Supreme Court's approval of affirmative actions for a greater number of female parliamentarians to be elected. We have created an obligation for political parties to finance female candidates with the same amount of budget that they use to finance male candidates. At this point, for the issue issue to be dealt with at the Supreme Court, the fact that both the Supreme Court and the Electoral Court were chaired by women was decisive. The three of us were pushing this agenda that was approved. The result is that since then, the increase in the number of parliamentarians has increased significantly in the last two elections in 2018 and in 2020 for the federal, state, and municipal levels. In this office, I also organized with the European Union debates with prosecutors and judges to strengthen their presence in the prosecutor service and in the judicial service throughout Brazil, and to adopt an agenda on the problems of women in society. With my departure, this agenda has shrunk, and the women I have indicated have been replaced by men with no debate on gender equality, gender parity inside the country. What is missing? I think it's sustainability. Female participation encounters visible and invisible barriers in Brazil. It is necessary to organize the movement, define a clear agenda and goals that include, and this is key, I think, for this agenda, positioning women in position of power. I believe that this will move us forward. Thank you.
Lesha, you are muted. Sorry. Lesha, you're muted. You have to unmute yourself.
I unmuted myself. Am I unmuted now? Hello?
Yes, you are.
Yes, you are unmuted now.
Okay. Raquel, thank you. Thank you very, very much. And we'll come back to you with maybe one or two questions after the next speaker.
Okay.
And I think it's extremely important, if you want to think about that beforehand. Why were the women replaced by the men? That would interest me. Having said that, I think it's absolutely great to go to Bonita Zarillo. She is the member of a city council in Canada. So we go to the next level of government and governance, if you like, and hear her experience on what's going on. And before I give her the floor, could the ladies who are still using their videos please shut them down, like Monique Kalou, so that we have the maximum bandwidth for everybody to speak. So having said that, Bonita Zarillo, yours is the floor. Please unmute your microphone and your video.
Thank you very much. And is my microphone unmuted and everyone can hear me?
It sounds fine to me.
Wonderful.
Yes.
Well, thank you very much. And thank you for the invitation and also the introduction, and great speakers that I would like to pivot off of some of the things that have already been said. I'm coming to you today from just outside of Vancouver in Canada. I'm in a city called Coquitlam, and we are on the unceded and traditional territory of the Squamish peoples and Coquitlam First Nations specifically. And Coquitlam, the word means red fish up the river, and salmon is very, very important, and the watersheds are very, very important in this area. So I just wanted to share that with you today before I get started. So I wanted to pivot right away around this power gap that was mentioned earlier. And we're talking today about an equity gap. And I like the language of power gap, and to change the language a bit to power gap, because this is one of the areas that we are definitely, the reason that we kind of keep losing space is this power gap. So I'll start by saying I got elected in 2013 in a by-election. So fortunately, 2 of the women that were on our local city council had gone through a provincial election, and they had been elected to the legislature, which left 2 spots on our city council. So a by-election is an excellent opportunity, if we're talking about ways to get elected, for women to get elected, because the turnout is significantly lower in a by-election. And so there's more opportunity to get the people that support you to the polls, more than the general public. And I would add to that, that if you are a progressive candidate, if you are a candidate more on the left side of the spectrum, that in by-elections, there's also the opportunity for a lot of collective work around unions that will support and get the word out to their constituents. So I'll say that the reason that I got elected in 2013 was because it was a by-election. I had the support of some high profile provincial politicians, and I had the support of the collection of a union that could help me to make sure that my supporters got to the polls. So want to talk about getting in. So we're talking about fix the system, get her elected, and I'd like to also talk about staying elected. So that's kind of where my topic is going to be today, is staying elected. So first of all, I realized when I got in, because I had been 25 years in private business, when I got into an environment, an elected environment, there's really no oversight. There's no rules, there's no protection for inappropriate language, inappropriate behavior. It is a real center of egos. It's a very interesting center of egos, and anyone can do and say anything they want. And I learned that very, very early. And what I realized very, very early was that the system certainly was not made for women. Women wouldn't speak this way. They wouldn't treat each other this way. We're not as competitive in airspace. We're collaborative, looking for solutions, and that's not the environment that I experienced even at the local level. But the other thing I noticed was it is natural, like I guess it's human nature to want to be able to get along, to conform to the norms, to be safe. As women, we are raised to keep ourselves safe. And what I noticed in the environment of elected officials or around the council table was that there was a lot of conforming going on. And I reflect on it now after 7 years. It's really about being safe. Not speaking out all the time when you know something isn't right because you don't want the backlash. Internally, the system, and I think this is something that the previous speaker talked about, how we can make inroads, we can get on committee, get bureaucrats, women bureaucrats hired. We can do these things, but as soon as we let our foot, we retract and we go back. And I found that very, very important to understand that I'm going to have to step out and not conform if I want to make any change in the system. So there's 3 points I want to talk about for that. So there's 3 things how to keep women elected, because we know that if we want to make inroads, women are not going to be able to conform in the system that wasn't built for us. I love this saying, we weren't at the meeting when the rules were made for how government happens. And we certainly have to step out to change, be the change that we want. But the 3 things I wanted to share that help to stay elected, because it's a difficult road. What you see on social media, a contingent of that, the vitriol that you see on social media against women politicians, a portion of that happens inside the walls of these elected roles as well. So I would say there's three things. Number one, for women, to push the envelope, to be the change, know the rules, know all the procedures, know all of the bylaws, know the rules, and enforce them. I think what I've found over my time is there's this almost like a gentleman's agreement about how things are done once you get elected, or in the environment that you step into, and you have to really make them accountable for the rules. So an example of that would be in city council, there is committee meetings, there is open meetings, and there is closed meetings. And the legislation says that to go into a closed meeting, you need to pass a resolution in an open meeting. And that was something that it took me 5 years to get them to finally start passing a resolution in an open meeting to go into closed. So those are the sort of things that you just need to keep pushing on the rules. Number two, you really need to protect your mental health. And one of our speakers earlier talked about the fact that it's becoming more gendered. Women politicians are getting more marginalized based on their gender. And you really need to protect your mental health. And the way that you do that is not inside the system, but outside. So rely on your community groups, your external supports. And if you can, get yourself appointed or be part of organizations that believe in equity, are progressive, and that will validate what you're saying, because you're going to be in an environment where people are going to try to unvalidate things that you say. So my example on that is I'm part of an organization called Federation of Canadian Municipalities. And of course, they're going to start doing some work outside of my house while I'm talking. I'm part of that group, and that's a wonderful place where I'm validated and able to talk to other women electeds. And number three, it's our role once we get elected to be helping others, the ones that come behind us, for us to make sure that we create an environment that is safer. That is safer for the ones that come behind us. And again, it's heavy lifting. It's going to be heavy lifting. As was said before, you're going to make inroads. And when you step back or you step away, you're going to note that those inroads are going to get taken away. So I'm just going to close out by reiterating that statement that the system is not made for us. We weren't at the meeting, but we do have the ability to make ground, to make up ground, and you can help. You can help by voting for women, because I think that's also one of the things that happens is that I've been on doorsteps before where women say, well, I don't vote for women just because they're women. And I have to say, we need you to vote for us. That's a big barrier here, is to get the voter to come out and support women. So thank you very much for inviting me today, and I'm happy to take any questions later.
Okay, Benita. I'm totally flabbergasted, impressed. Thank you very, very much. And I think we have some opportunity for questions now. And I think one of the questions that popped up in my chat box a few times is that could you quickly explain what by-elections are, because people don't understand how this works.
Absolutely.
Okay, sorry. Go ahead quickly.
Yes. So when there is in regular between regular election cycles, sometimes a politician will step away, have some reason to leave their role, and that's in between regular elections. And these are called by-elections, and they're elections where seats midterm are filled. And usually there's a much lower turnout of voters, and there's an ability to really influence your voters to come to the polls. And it's a good way to get women elected and to get them in.
So you have to stay very tuned to what's going on in between, right? Not just focus on the normal cycle, but also on what's happening in between because people retire or quit or whatever. That's clear
Very
to me.
good point. Yes.
I think the second question I would have is you were saying that you were involved with indigenous peoples. And how do you think that features in all of this? Because that's another another problem that women face if they're also indigenous, isn't it?
It absolutely is, and it's a very wide-ranging conversation that's happening across the world right now. Is, you know, this intersectional lens for women, is that we need to also do the work for all the different intersections, you know, the different races, the different cultures. So yeah, the Indigenous, I've been part of the some Indigenous relations committees here for about 6 years in the work I do, and it's definitely heavy lifting that we have to do as women, because it's not going to be coming from anywhere other than women to open the door for women of Indigenous heritage. So yes, that's another aspect that we're talking about a lot in the progressive circles in government.
Okay. I see on my screen, passing by very quickly, a wonderful lady that's called Eva Richter. Eva, would there be something that you want to comment on this and follow up on Benita? Or am I now completely passing you a buck that you don't want? If not, then come back to us later. But if you do, I'm giving you the floor, and you can unmute yourself and the video.
Thank you very much indeed, Lesha, and it is a pleasure to be here and to see the difficulties that are reflected all over in the question of election of women. One comment that I caught a little while ago was the comment that that was made by the last speaker, Benita, who said that very often she would come across women who said they would simply not vote for women simply because they were women. And you tended to sort of pass over that comment. I wonder if I could hear some comments from others about that issue alone, because it has come up over and over again. Should we be voting for women simply because they are women? Should we be saying no? These are not the criteria we want to have. At the same time that we know that there are extraordinarily well-qualified women who should be promoted and who are not, who fall between the cracks. How do we really strive for and achieve excellence in the women that we vote for, who will represent us the way we want to be represented?
Okay, Eva, as usual, you asked challenging questions, and I think one of our later speakers will come back to part of that as well. So I would like to go back to Raquel. I mean, one of the things that you, I'm not sure, that you mentioned, I think, is that as soon as the government changed, or your position changed, the women were replaced again by men. So how did that happen? Was there no law to say people who are in place stay in place, or I'm not sure why that happened. So Raquel, can you elaborate a little bit on that? Raquel, you're muted.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I think we should think a little bit about how to organize the idea that the presence of a woman in a position of power should not be one exception that happens once in a lifetime, and that should be studied in a history book, as something that happened once, and that woman was so incredible and formidable, and she did that, but she was never ever more replaced by another woman. And this is happened in Brazil, and I think in other parts of the world. We are still an exception in the position of power, like it happened to me. It is very difficult to achieve a position like that, and to prove that we are capable. We are more demanded, we are more scrutinized than men in general. And if we do something wrong, as every woman being does, we are more subject to a more strict judgment. So I think in order to face this reality, which is the rare presence of women in position of power, we should build an agenda that once we get there, we should defend that we would be replaced by another woman, or in this position or in another similar one. But we should have a clear agenda about how many women would be expected to be in position of power in a specific country, like in mine. What I was also saying that is that when I was in the position of power, I was defending one agenda of open access to other women, like, for example, at the parliament. And how we do that? We had a very old law saying, well, we should be a balance between men and women in parliament, but it was never implemented. The law was there, but it was never implemented. And what women was saying to us, they were saying, we don't have the funds to finance our campaign. And because in Brazil, part of the finance support is come from a public source, we defended at the court. Well, if it's public source, public funds, the amount of funds that would support male and female candidatures should be the same. And when it was approved by the Supreme Court, the number of women in the parliament in all three federal levels elevated a lot. And it happens recently in 2018 and 2020. So what I'm saying, defend access, but defend staying in the power. I think that should be a good agenda for us. Sorry.
Okay. Thank you, Raquel. I think I heard one comment twice now from you and Bonita, that one of the things is not just get women elected, but also keep them in office. And I think that's a very important message, because it involves finance, it involves evaluation methodologies, it involves whatever. So I think that's one I would take as one of the conclusions of this session. Then I have a lady called Nestle. She wanted to ask a question. Nestle, if you're there, please unmute yourself and show us your face if you can.
Hi, I was not ready to be called. I wrote my question to Bonita.
Nestle, where are you from?
I am originally from Turkey. I am with BPW, New York City, VP of Advocacy, calling from New Jersey. And my question was to Bonita. She made such great points, and I was asking her experience on women not speaking up, not only mixed groups, but female groups as well. What's her experience, and how could that be changed, that women do not stand up and ask questions and express opinions? Thank you.
Okay, Bonita, you're challenged. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the question. And I think part of it goes to that 30% rule that United Nations says you need to have 30% of any marginalized group at the table before they can be heard. And I think that's, you know, it's that feedback loop that we get as women when we're in an environment that wasn't made for us. We get a negative feedback loop when we stand up to talk about, for example, the need for childcare or the need for flexible work, that's not the norm. That's not considered to be successful traits, that you need those things. And then you get this negative feedback loop continuously. So if you're less than 30%, if you're in a group where, you know, you don't have at least 30% of the women's voices, you keep getting a negative feedback loop, and it actually wears on your confidence, and it just continues to keep you silent. So I think it goes back to the point that the previous speaker said too, which is like inside these systems, inside these institutions, we need to have senior women in power, whether it's elected or bureaucrats, so that they nurture and give you positive feedbacks. This is one of the skills that and I don't like to say that it's men, but unfortunately that's what we're talking about now, women versus men. That's one of the skills and the tools that the men use, is they amplify each other, they reinforce each point, such and such, whereas women, they'll do the opposite. So you really have to stand in your power as a woman, and you really have to use those tools I said externally, like making sure you protect your mental health and you ground yourself outside of those tables, because it can get really rough.
Okay, Bonita, thank you. I think Rachel and Bonita together send out 3 important messages. One is that you talked about the 30% criterion, Bonita. There's a lot of scientific evidence that if you have 30% or more of women in a group, and by the way, this goes for all diversity, then you don't get roped in, sucked in to the prevailing culture, but you can actually make a difference. And so that would be the minimum of making a change. I think the second message I got from this is that it might help if we have preferential votes. And I think Annemiek and Marion later on are coming back to that as well. And I think it is extremely interesting that you keep saying, okay, help each other to get re-elected. And to sort of, before I go to the next question, there's also, you know, why are women not supporting each other? Do you have an opinion on that, Rachel or Bonita? What's happening there?
I would say very briefly that we have to work more on our collaborative approach. Women in general are more competitors among themselves than at the public agenda, at the public arena. I think we compete a lot. And the second is that we don't have an organized movement, feeling ourselves as part of a minority in our society, like the Indians, the Black people, or the women are, I think, are the same. So we need to organize an agenda with a clear purpose or clear path that we could follow together. in the international and domestic arena. I think both perspectives complement each other. We need to work more on the collaborative approach of our attitude and organize a movement with a clear agenda.
Nice challenge, Raquel. Thank you. Bonita?
Thank you. Well, my experience has been, and I'm talking about at the local level, and at the local level, it's very much about roads and streets, and the inside is quite male dominated. So the bureaucrats are quite male dominated. The planning and development general managers, the engineering general managers, the city managers are most likely men. I mean, we just don't have a critical mass of women in those higher positions. And I think it just becomes such a burden to carry, to have to continuously bring forward your gender and to bring forward your ideas, that I think that what happens is it wears on some women. And I think it's hard for them to keep the stamina of stepping out. And sometimes it's just easier to fold in with the system and carry on.
Okay. Noted. And also please note that one of the biggest issues for women is actually transport and roads, because the men design them in such a way that they take more time to go to work and get the kids to school because the infrastructure is illogical. I had a question from a lady called Daniela. Are you still around? And I can't see your last.
Yes, actually, I don't have a question.
Okay.
Let's call it a comment.
Okay.
Canada, the Canadian political landscape is as easy as complicated, particularly when it comes to women. At the federal level, we are divided in ridings. So yes, you will get women running into an election, but they will not necessarily receive a riding that is winnable. Winnable ridings are going to men in political parties. Why women are divided? Why don't we support each other? Just like men, women have political ideologies.
Yep.
Then we are competing because there are women who have firm voices and there are women who will go along with a platform of her own political party, and then she becomes a decorative statistic.
Oops.
So what do we want really? How do we get at that point in space in time where we are ready to take our place, not to make space? Because we have arrived at the point in time where we need to take the space. Because if we are looking now, for example, of how women leaders around the world have dealt with COVID-19, we need to start wondering, how do we educate society in order to make them understand that women are better leaders than men?
Okay. I think that was a statement. And I would say that in most cases, the countries that do have a female prime minister are actually doing quite well. Before I go back, and probably the last one in this round, Susan O'Malley, are you still around? You want to
Yes.
express what you wanted to tell me?
Well, there were two things, and I noticed Ireland has answered one of them in the chat, and one was the discussion of quotas. If you look at the first draft of the agreed conclusions, it really for women.
For the CSW you're now talking about?
Yes, CSW that is currently being looked at, but it's interesting. No longer do they say 30 or 40% of women. Now it's 50%. And that was nice, yes. But there is a whole question of quotas, but this is interesting that Sharon has said in Ireland, no, women, is it Sharon? No, it's Catherine. In Ireland, that how it increased participation of women, of the quotas. And that I guess is to be expected. I don't think the United States would ever do that, but what we are doing in New York City is what we call ranked voting, and you called it, what did you call it? In other words, when you vote 1, 2, 3.
Preferential votes.
Oh, preferential vote is what you call it. Okay. And that the mayoral election, we've never had a woman mayor in New York City, but this year we have preferential voting and there's a woman running, and I think she has a very good chance. But if anyone has any experience of that, I would love to hear, or what the speakers feel about quotas and preferential voting.
Well, I think 2 of our next panelists are going to try and answer part of your questions, at least. So having said all that, I will close this round of questions and thank all of you for your comments and your questions. I hope I addressed most of the questions I saw passing by. I'm doing my best. But in the meantime, I would like to go to our next 2 speakers, or 3 speakers, basically. And first of all would be Sonja Thorbergsdottir from Iceland. And she has a very different experience with elections into power again, because she's the chair of the Icelandic Federation of State and Municipal Employees. So this is not official government, but this is an organization that tries to do their best in making sure that people have good working conditions, Sonja, or not?
Yes,
so, please, Sonja, please take the floor.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here with you, participating in these discussions. So I wanted to make maybe 2 introductory notes. One being on what we do here, my type of federations in Iceland, but kind of following up the discussion that has taken place already. I was trying to find the way to explain why it has been such a fundamental societal change here in Iceland, because my personal opinion is that women stand together here. I mean, the majority of them. You always have to have a small caveat. But thinking of how it happened and how we usually explain these societal changes, and the fact that we have come a long way towards gender equality, we still have a long way to go though. I think it can be traced back to the women's strike in 1975. It's estimated that about 90% of Icelandic women left their work to just make the demand of being treated equally as to men, and they wanted to show their worth. So they both striked in their paid labor and their unpaid labor. So they did not, well, the men had to take care of the children and cook the meals, and the story says that hot dogs were sold out that day. And that, I mean, to reach that conclusion that 90% of women walked out of their homes or their jobs that day is of course a result of massive planning. And we are talking women in politics, women within unions, like different organizations in Iceland coming together and just bringing forward solidarity and mobilizing women. And then the same year that I was born in 1982, there was an all women's political party established, because they wanted to promote women's interest within Congress and also within municipalities. And after that, you could see that proportionally, more women were participating in democratically elected positions within the state and municipalities. But of course, as we discussed here, there's always the risk of a setback. So we've gone forwards and then backwards and etc. in our last parliamentary elections, we almost reached the milestone of almost having half of MPs being women, or about 48% were women. And then after that, in the Congress or Parliament as is it now, they are about 38%. So it's always the question of remaining the seat, as we've discussed here. But if I tell you a little bit about my federation, almost 90% of Icelandic working people are a member of unions. So it's a quite different situation from other countries in the world. And because of this, the social partners, that meaning representatives of workers and then of the employers, they enjoy a strong status. So like Lesja mentioned here before, our work within an umbrella organization like my own, so it's the unions who are members of the umbrella organization within my federation. And we are not only promoting in regards of what happens in working life for people, but promoting their rights in general. So one of the things that I've been working on for many years here is longer maternity or paternity leave and just on equal rights in general, because we have a platform and we have a strong conversation with the government and municipalities. So we can kind of get our ideas or demands a little bit forward in that way as well. But I was elected in 2018. I was the second woman to be elected, even though within my federation, 2/3 of the members are women and have been for decades. So at that time, it can be said that the unions were quite male-dominated in Iceland. It was quite common that the boards were kind of equally divided between women and men, but usually the top or the chair was a man. So at this point of time, there are the four largest umbrella organizations in Iceland. 3 of them have now single moms as chairs, and I'm one of them. So changes can come. And of course, it has an impact on the demands that you make and what you're kind of trying to draw forward at each time. But we were also discussing quotas here before. There has not been set by law. There's no regulations that says that political parties have to have quotas, but there are many political parties that do, and that, of course, changes the conversation, changes the society. So it's progress for everyone, which has kind of a spillover effect, and you can feel it within unions as well. I have to say, because I started working for my federation in 2008. I was a lawyer. I was not elected at that time. And then came the time when the previous chair had announced that she would be stepping out. Yeah. And then came kind of the question, and many asked who would be the next chair. And some people approached me and asked me whether or not I would be up for the task. And I always said very adamantly no. I had no plans to be the next chair of the federation. As I told you before, I'm a single mom, and I thought this will just be too much. I will never find the balance between the private life and the working life if I would do both. And then further people, or more people, kind of came along and asked whether or not I was contemplating this, who would be the next chair and who would take over, and what mission or kind of what track they would be on, if they would maintain the same emphasis as the previous chair had, which I was working very closely with, and equal rights had a very large proportion of the work that we were doing. And then it got me thinking, and I kind of realized that it wasn't a given that someone would kind of follow up on the work that we had been doing, and there could be a setback there as well. So I decided to run. And of course, it's not an easy task to take the decision, And also you have to know whether or not people want you to run and if someone will actually elect you. So there was a lot of groundwork during that time. But I think when all comes to all, kind of the main message of my personal story is women's solidarity. Because they were mostly women that were approaching me saying kind of, you can do this is the right next step, and etc., and we will help you. And of course, they agreed on the mission that I had been on. So I think the strongest message is women's solidarity. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Sonia. I think you sent a few very important messages, but I'll pick up on the last one, women's solidarity. Let's see how we can help each other. And I think the other one that you mentioned, but I'll come back to you on that one, is I'm intrigued about the fact that the women who are now leading some of the initiatives in Iceland are all single moms. How is that? So you can think about that a little bit. What do you think is the common denominator? And I think there's another one that you mentioned is strike. You know, at one point you have to just put your foot down and say enough is enough. So those are a few messages I got from you. And I would love to go now, Mariet, if you can help us to go to the interview with Annemiek and Marion. Annemiek and Marion are both Dutch. Both of them are elected members of or have been on water boards and in local councils. And to give you a little bit of context to explain how our system works in the Netherlands, the first presentation is how it works in the Netherlands.
Dutch government can be described as a constitutional monarchy with a parliamentary system. The constitution determines how the power is divided between the king and the other governmental institutions. The central Dutch government is the key player, consisting of a cabinet, a parliament made up of 2 chambers, the upper house elected through provincial elections, and the lower house elected directly by the people. Furthermore, we have decentralized authorities, such as 355 municipalities, 12 provinces, and 21 water boards, for all elections are being organized. In the Netherlands, we have many political parties. For example, 37 parties are joining the upcoming elections of the lower chamber in March 21. The next picture shows the number of women in these different government bodies. By the way, I was very surprised that it was so difficult to find these figures on internet. What you see is that in the cabinet, we have 43% women. And if you include the state secretaries, it's even 50%. And that is wonderful. However, only 8% women are King's Commissioners. And in fact, it's only 1 woman. In the lower and higher chamber, as well as the provincial councils, we have approximately 1/3 women. It is interesting to mention that during the past years, there was a very successful citizens' initiative, Vote for a Woman, emphasizing the importance of more equal representation of women in government bodies. Results were promising. During the municipal elections in March 2018, at least 75 women have been given a place on the council by means of preferential votes. The same is true for the provincial council elections. 43 women gained a women place through the campaign. For the upcoming elections of the lower chamber, most parties, especially the progressive ones, have 40% or more women on winning seats. And that is a huge change in the Netherlands. To conclude, progress is visible, be it slow.
Annemiek, thank you very much. This was really interesting. This is indeed how the Dutch system works. And what I'm wondering now is about the two of you. I mean, how did you get involved? So maybe I can start with Marion. Marion, why did you want to become involved in politics?
Yes, well, why? Why did I? It had certainly something to do with Women for Water Partnership. As long as Women for Water Partnership exists, I am involved with them as delegates of the United Dutch Women Organizations and recent years as steering committee member. And it is because of the repeating message of Women for Water Partnership on conferences about leadership and equal participation of women, I became aware of the importance of women taking part in decision-making bodies. For instance, because of their broader view, but also I am involved in politics because this is a role where you really can steer and make a difference.
Absolutely, I can't agree with you more, but I can imagine that you just can't ring a bell and say, okay, here I am. How did you prepare yourself to get elected?
Yes, there is a special things you had to do. And well, for me, it started in 2008 when the election of the water boards in the Netherlands changed from a personal system to a list system. There was an action started by the government to get more women into the water boards. Until then, it was male domination in these boards. And the Dutch Women's Council started a campaign for Water Seeks a Woman. And I decided to sign up for it. And they provided training on how to present yourself when you're applying for a place on the candidate list. And we also learned about the various tasks of a water board.
So that was really, it's like a training to
Yes.
get involved. And so, of course, now everyone is interested to know if you are really elected. Did you get elected in the end?
This training gave me enough self-confidence to finally take on the challenge. And as a newcomer to the political party for which I have chosen, I ended up at position 10 on the candidate list, not really favorable, but by using my network at the women's organizations and the agriculture organization, as I am a farmer, I was elected by preferred votes. That was very surprising for me. And well, the following year, I was also asked to participate in the municipal elections of my residence for the same party. And then I immediately ended up at the candidate list on place 3 as the first woman. Probably they like my way of politics so much that for the other 2 periods, I now have been the party leader, dus number 1, with the municipal elections, and since then also the chair of my local political party.
Wow, I mean, very impressive, I must say. And I see that you really enjoy doing this and you really got excellent results. It's amazing. So it's a good initiative for others to take on the same challenge. Maybe it might be different for you, Annemiek. What is your story? I mean, how did you become a member of the water board? Because I think you are a member of the water board already, aren't you?
Yes, I am. I was elected in 2019, but it started as follows. I was director of Women for Water Partnership. I mobilized organization to join the campaign, Vote for a Woman in a Water Board. And then somebody asked me, Why are you not applying? Why are you not going up for elections? And I was puzzled. It never occurred to me to get involved in politics myself. But after a bit of thinking, I concluded, practice what you preach.
That is excellent, of course. And so again, it's the same thing as Marion, who said, well, I was surprised that I was put on the list number 3. So you had the same thing. Is that a women issue? But anyway, how did you get elected in the end?
First, I started to collect more information and followed a course about the functioning of the water boards, just as Marion did as well. And during that course, I became very enthusiastic and I really wanted to go for it. Therefore, I approached a political party with a special focus on water authorities to show my interest. And they invited me for an interview, which went very well. And to my surprise, I was positioned as number 2 on the list and elected.
Wow, congratulations. So you both were very successful, which means women can be successful. And Marion, I mean, you even have been chair for quite a number of years now, I think, so of your city council. And it's not a small, tiny village. It's quite a good council. So do you enjoy doing that?
Yes, I certainly feel very honored to fulfill this position. And I enjoy switching between the different roles associated with this position. And as person, I have been able to develop enormously in these roles, and I'm still learning.
Great, great. Marion, thank you for your story. It really enthuses people, and I hope that there will be many more women who will join you in your stride to get women into politics. It sounds really interesting. So then I would like to go back now to Annemiek. So Annemiek, what is your experience in the water board if you compare that to Marion's?
Yeah. First of all, I like it very much. I entered a totally new world, and it's great to contribute to issues such as the quality of water and the influence of climate change on water availability. Heavy rains and drought, for example. But it is not always easy. It remains difficult to get influence in such a male-dominated environment. What I notice is that stereotypes, such as what you see on this slide, are playing a role. For example, if he has an expensive car, you think he must be financially sound. But if she has expensive habits, then you wonder, what will she do with our money? And these stereotypes, they are playing a role for both men and women unconsciously.
Thank you, Annemiek. Interesting experiences, and I really enjoy listening to your stories. So, but I mean, Marion, do you recognize these stereotypes and the story of Annemiek?
Well, in the municipality, I not really have felt this same description as Annemiek has told us, but I have to say that there are some men who comply in male culture about jokes and approach, especially belittling the somewhat insecure women. I can handle with it, but I will never get used to it. And that more women have been elected to the city council helps to improve the culture. Now there is a percentage of 30 female in our city, and half of the chairs are also women. And in fact, as our mayor is a woman, it helps to break through the typical men's behavior. And as I say, the Me Too movement also helps.
So it's going into the right direction, you say, and yeah, that is really good to hear. So what facilitates your work?
Well, of course, the unconditional support of my husband Ben and my 5 now grown-up daughters. It takes a lot of time to be the chairperson, about 20 hours a week. But also because I am a farmer, I'm flexible in my work time. And I can choose to have a conversation with residents or interest groups or having a meeting during daytime. And for people who work from 9 to 5, it is almost impossible.
I can understand that, really. And Annemieke, have you got the same issues, or what facilitates your work?
Marion talks about flexibility. And for me, the flexibility of my employer was very, very important. They gave me all the space I needed. For example, if I have to attend a meeting during working hours, I can catch up during the evening. It's a matter of trust, and that is so important. I know that not all employers are that flexible, and it might also depend on the type of job. But also in my private life, I'm very flexible since my daughter left home. I can meet during daytime, during dinner time, etc., etc. And that is really a necessity if you want to get any influence at all. All in all, I'm very happy that I'm able to do this, and it's very nice that the women in our board are collaborating more and more, and sometimes have informal meetings to share experiences and discuss issues at stake. And that energizes me.
And it makes you all stronger, I can imagine. That
Yes.
you support each other. Ladies, I mean, thank you very, very much for these very interesting stories. So if I'm going to summarize your stories, first of all, the campaign is important, but the campaign Vote for a Woman has really supported you to put your candidacy forward. So let us continue this campaign, Vote for a Woman. Furthermore, the support of women's organizations is very important. And that helps you and other people, other women, to build capacity. Then we cannot underestimate the support employers give us. So if we get, as an employee, the time and the flexibility to join these political organizations, that is very, very supportive and very good for women to continue and put their candidacy forward. Flexibility is important. Flexibility to attend meetings during the day and the evening. It's important. I mean, of course, if you get the support of the employer, that will be very helpful. But you yourself also has to be flexible. Your family has to adjust to the fact that you might have to work in the evening or during dinner time. And stereotypes. It can stand in the way, but I think all together we will work to get this out of the way, and that will definitely support the candidacy of women. So thank you both. Thank you for this insight in the Dutch system. Thank you for the insight in your own campaign. And let's continue and work with other countries, and we go back to the session of the CSW.
Hello, everybody. Well, I have to digest all of this. We muted the chat box for a little while, but if you still want to comment on what was just said by Marion, Annemieke, and Marit, please give us your comments. And I think it would be interesting to debate and see how people feel with two issues. One is the quota and the preferential vote. How do you feel about that? And I think another one is how do we get this message across to other women that you can do this? So the first one, I would like to give the floor to, sorry, is have this. You posed a question. Have this Karlsdottir. If you want, please unmute yourself and comment on what you just said.
I did not post a question, Rasha, but I was really replying to your question.
Okay.
Because you were wondering how comes there are 3 of the union chairs, single mothers. I was just quoting and say, it's the infrastructure that needs to be there, because if the infrastructure is not in place so that all, both men and women, can work and still have children, then that is not going to happen. And that's why also the participation in the workforce is so high in Iceland. So it's really, I'm just reading my own comment.
No, I apologies, but it's still a very important comment you made. So dutifully noted. I also saw something passing by that was on, well, this is my own interpretation, but how useful are quota when it comes to numbers? Does it really help? Or are there other issues that need to be considered? So maybe Annemiek, you want to comment on that?
Thank you, Lesja. Yeah, it's a very difficult question. I think it's and. I think quotas sometimes are very helpful if it doesn't, because we all know it doesn't go because everybody thinks it's important. Sometimes you need more to stress the importance that diversity or more women on board or more equal participation, whatever you call it, is also enriching the results or the debate or the so it really helps. But the other side of quotas is that people and also women are thinking, I'm only in because it's because of quotas, and in fact I'm not good enough. And men think women are in because we had these quota, which is not at all true, I think, because women in these type of positions are often better than men. They have more qualifications, but they are also modest and always think we are not good enough. So it's quota, but also creating conditions, campaigns. It is and also breaking through all these stereotypes.
Okay, that sounds pretty clear to me. I also saw a comment from Megan Shellman Ricard. Would you like to take the floor?
Thank you, Lesja. Can you hear me okay? I'm not going to turn my video on today.
You're okay. If you have bad hair day, that's fine too.
Yes, there's a woman in our group in the United States, Linda Jennings, and she and I have been discussing how to bring forward women, and she said that throughout her leadership initiatives and everything that she's worked with, one of the things that keeps coming up for her is that we as women seem to see opportunities and leadership positions and roles like that as a piece of a pie that's finite. and that there's only enough for a few women. So if I take my piece of pie, there's only 3 more pieces of pie left. And that if we just did a paradigm shift and we all supported each other, that we would see it's more of an infinite pie if we're supporting each other. And that just because I have my piece of pie doesn't mean that you can't have yours. And I thought that that way of talking about it really hit me as a different way of looking at it, and a way of thinking, you know, we really need to support women and realize that just because I have something doesn't mean that there isn't space for another woman to also be a leader. I think that's how she was presenting it to me.
Okay. Sonia, you said in your contribution that you were approached, and in the end you said, first you said no, and then you said yes. So what made you change your mind?
Well, I realized that I had been on a mission for almost 8 years, and I was afraid that someone would kind of derail that mission that we had been on, me and my colleagues here within the Federation, and just prioritize our campaign or whatever we were doing at the moment in another way. And what kind of my main responsibilities since 2014-15 has been around the demand of a shorter working week. And when we first started discussing this, I mean, we were quite alone in Iceland. Nobody was kind of joining the conversation, and we were told that it would be an economic disaster and God knows what. So we finalized our collective agreements, my federation and within the public sector, in March last year. And guess what? We negotiated on a shorter working week. So, I mean, my experience is that you cannot make demands on a whimsical. You have to be very, very well prepared, and it takes a long time to reach kind of the conclusion that you want to reach. And I mean, the one that is best prepared will always win in the end.
Well, we had a big discussion 25 years ago in the Netherlands to bring our working week down to 32 hours a week. So what is your average working week in Iceland now?
It's 40 hours according to law. And in the collective agreements, the result was that for daytime workers, it would be 36 hours. But for shift time workers, it can go down to 32 hours a week because of the negative impact of shift work on your health.
Okay. Now, I do see quite a lot of people popping up. But if you would like to pose a question to either of our panelists, so first and second panel, please let me know or raise your hand. I think you can put your question in the chat, and I will try to respond to you. I had another question, basically to all panelists. Who helped you the most to get elected? What was the crunch to get you elected? Annemiek, Marion, Sonia, Bonita. What was for you was the crunching, the really game changer?
I will give you an answer, Lesja, if I am allowed.
No, please, Marion. Yes, go ahead.
Well, I think the most important is those who are in the selection commission of a candidate list. For me, there was enough women in it so to make the difference, and also the chair, who was a man, was very well, women-like to and saw potential in me. And I think also your network is very important, and to use your network to come to elect it. And the campaign, of course, is also a matter of how many money you have to use for that. But in the Netherlands, that's the party who pay for that. And in my situation then. But yeah, it is well the combination of it. But the first thing is the selection commission, and then the support of your network.
So if I get you right, Marion, the whole thing doesn't start with you getting elected. It starts from everything you've told me. Is one, who is on the election committee? Do you get support from other women or organizations to help you to figure out what the issue is and to support you in that? And as I think one of the other speakers said, how do you make sure that they keep supporting you? Because it's not just getting elected, but it's staying elected. I think Bonita and Sonia stressed.
Yes, as I'm now for 3 periods on a good position, I feel that some male party members get jealous of me because they think they could be better than me. And so you still had to prove yourself every time that you are the best position of the best one to have that position. And I think, yeah, show that you are very flexible and put enormous time in it. And also the way you can work together with the other parties. That's for me, as I look back to my career, I think that was why I'm still in.
Okay, sounds like a wise woman. So Raquel, if you have heard all of this, what do you think with your experience? Because you've been in a very powerful position in Brazil. I heard in another session that you were in that you are now challenging your own government on some of the things they have done or not done. And then you hear the experience of all these other women. What do you think? What is your reaction?
I think the reality and the challenge that our women are facing in Brazil are very similar to the challenges that they are facing in other countries. And I would like to bring to this panel one perspective, which is that why did we fight for political rights since the beginning instead of civil rights and other rights? Because we knew that the women have rights, but the laws are made by men. So women's rights and men's laws was this expression that were being used by women, the suffragists, since the beginning, to realize that we need the right to vote in order to establish women's rights. But we need to be elected also to create rights or public policies to support women's rights. So when we talk about quotas, we are talking about the right to be elected. So what we saw in the last century, that women's rights expanded in all areas, but we are still facing the problem of being elected. So electing men it's important because we are choosing men that will fight for women's rights. But being there is also important. So when we talk about quota, we are talking about how difficult it is to be elected. And we should fight for that. Defending quota is not only good, but it's necessary. If not, we, in many countries like Brazil, we won't have voice in the parliament. And in order to do that, we should create a movement that will identify in each country where are the barriers to be elected. In my country was being chosen by the party. So we created a quota for how many women candidates every political party should have. And when we got that, we realized that, well, the political parties would indicate a specific number of women candidates, but they won't finance it. So we decided that the amount of money that would finance men and women should be the same if the money is public. So this is a second barrier we were facing inside Brazil, but each country faced a difficult barrier. So this is for one side to get women to be elected. But now I think the challenge for the 21st century is also for women to occupy bureaucratic positions in order to develop public policies. Because when we talk about water, lack of water, or security rights, or number of hours, working hours, we are talking about public policies too. So we need to defend the presence of women, not only in elected positions, but also in bureaucratic positions.
Okay.
Those responsible for developing public policies. I think that's how I understand the discussion about quota.
Well, I've heard a few things, and one of the repeats I hear is that you need to know the rules because they were not made by women. But if we want to get women in an elected position, we need to know the rules. And then once we get elected, go and change the rules. That might be very short summary of the issue. But I also saw Benita coming back online. So Benita, tell me, what is your
I think that summary that you just said is great, but I just wanted to amplify something that Rochelle just said about the bureaucrats. And this is an area that I realized as soon as I got elected, because the bureaucrats control the agenda. And like any of us that work with data, they present the information, the reports, the data, the way that they want the message or the story to be told. But actually there's where they have the power. So it's very much male culture to have soft power where they meet in hallways, where they meet over a drink, and where they influence this policy to the bureaucrats, and then the bureaucrats bring the policy that way. And that is an area that we need to address. And I just want to have a shout out here for the Seroptimist. I'm here speaking on behalf of Seroptimist, that this is an area that Seroptimist did a really interesting collaboration with a few years ago with a local city and bureaucrats. And we talked about this need to have more women bureaucrats. And I remember being at a water partnership event a few years ago at CSW where the mayor of Hoboken came and she talked about rebuilding, and she talked about women's voices around water and rebuilding after the flood and the storms. And I just want to say, and I said it that day and I'll say it again, we need more women in bureaucratic roles, making policy, designing cities. And I encourage all of you, if you're thinking of that, if you have daughters, sisters, aunts, please encourage them. There's a lot of power in being a bureaucrat.
Okay. Bonita, message received. I think you're talking about Dawn, who was the previous mayor of Hoboken. And I have a high appreciation of what she did. We actually tried to ask her to be part of our session today. Unfortunately, she was not available, but we will certainly figure out how to keep her involved, because she was really, really interesting in how she managed citizens' engagement after the storm and the hurricane in Hoboken, and basically had people design how to rebuild instead of just doing what they did before, which I think is a big issue today. You know, we don't want to go back to how it was before. We want to make it better. Marit, your hand was up, so please.
Yeah, it was a bit difficult to get unmuted. No, I mean, there have been other questions. The only thing I'm interested in is to see in a couple of weeks ago in a Dutch in a national newspaper, there was a research on social media, and it was very clear that the social media, the tweets, the Facebook, the everything, the LinkedIn, is so aggressive against women. They receive women politicians. They receive shocking harassment, violence, even death threats. They receive. Their family is being threatened. And I was wondering, I mean, there was one politician who got 150,000 bad reactions, tweets, in 3 months. Is this, I think it is something that is happening more and more, because it's very nice to tweet, specifically if you want to be anonymous. But is this an international something, or is this something that also happens to all of you?
Okay, who wants to answer that question? Are you restricted, or you know, think, okay, I'm not feeling safe, so that's why I stay out of things? I saw Bonita coming back, but maybe Annemiek, you want to say something about that?
Now, fortunately, and that's in this sense. Sorry, here I am. In the water boards, I have never heard about stories of women in the board who have been harassed. And but in a former job, when I was a director of a big organization, I experienced the same. It was terrible. I also did the same as the politicians nowadays in the Netherlands do. I got advice of a grand man, and he said to me, Annemiek, please don't read it, because it's, you know, your whole energy, your whole enthusiasm, your whole confidence, everything will decrease. You will become sad, and you are such a strong woman, so don't read it and don't listen to it. That's what the advice was, and that's how I followed it. But in this position in the water board, I fortunately, I haven't faced it yet.
Okay, I'm happy with that. So we have 4 minutes left. So if any of you has a urgent question or an urgent comment that you want to give, please raise your hand or put it in the chat, because otherwise we're going to start and closing down the session. I think we had some extremely good conclusions earlier on already from Annemiek and Marion, and from Sonia, and from Bonita, and from Raquel. And we will try and make some kind of a summary out of that, especially in terms of how can we go forward, what is good advice to women to be involved. I am extremely appreciative of all the women I saw online, the ones I know and the ones I don't know. And I think it's important that you forward the message. Women can be elected. We can beat the system, especially if we work together. And I think that was one of the main messages coming through for me, especially if we support each other. And if we overcome our shyness, and basically if we can't, then ask help for others. And that's again overcoming shyness. So having said all that, I'm looking for hands or questions coming up. And if not, to ensure you that the recording of this session will be posted on the Women for Water Partnership website. The address is currently in the chat. And I would like to thank all the women who were brave enough to share their experience with us, and give their advice. And I'm sure some of this will lead to additional actions in the coming month or years. What I've learned is be brave and be patient, and the combination will get you everywhere. So, my dearest friends, all of you, thank you very much for participating. Thank you very much for contributing, and hope to see all of you alive and well, one point in time, anywhere in the world, or if it doesn't work out, online again. Thank you very much to all of you. Bye-bye.
Congratulations, it was very well conducted. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye to all.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, thank you.